Hello and welcome to yet another episode of How to Be a Great GM. Well, we've had questions coming in thick and fast, and today I wanted to talk about one that will form a small series, and that is how to deal with different size role-playing groups. Now, as first-time GMs or as experienced GMs, dealing with a group of 50 or 60 players is physically impossible. But dealing with a group of 7 or 8 is manageable. On the opposite scale, dealing with a group of 1 is pretty tricky. And that's the subject of today. How to roleplay with 1 player and 1 GM. Anything less than that and you're just playing with yourself. So, what do we expect? What is a normal group size? Well, a normal group size, depending on which rulebook you are looking at, varies between 4 and 5 players. So when you drop that down to 1 or 2 players, but principally when you drop it down to 1 player, things need to change. Most noticeably, what changes in a one-on-one game? Well, your combat suddenly changes. You don't have a cleric who can keep the party alive using healing magic, with a warrior fighting next to him, keeping all those big bads off of the cleric whilst he's busy healing the warrior. So your party dynamic is just not there. You have 1 person who needs to look after themselves, and that's in combat and in terms of healing. If we take that from a fantasy setting and we put it into a science fiction setting, it becomes even more dire. Now, instead of having a crew of intrepid heroes sailing around the galaxy in their Firefly-class starship, it's 1 person flying around in a ship that needs to be crewed by 1 person. So that's something to take into consideration, is that you no longer have the luxury of multiple people doing multiple things. You also need to expect that there will be far more politics. The game is definitely changing. We don't have the interpolitics of a party that will keep them debating for hours and hours on whether to cross the bridge or not, whether to make a trade deal with the alien species or not. You have 1 person who consults with themselves and makes decisions. So the game changes. The politics is now between player and NPC, not between player and player. This has ramifications on your storytelling, but we'll get to those just now. There is much more focus on the character. This means that during character creation, you as the GM need to be sitting there helping the player create their character to the smallest detail. The reason is you're going to need to use all of those details, and you'll find out why in a little bit. So, pardon me, you need to have a lot more involvement around the character and around the character's story. And you need to expect that the game is going to move a lot faster. Something that you could get through in maybe 3 or 4 hours of gameplay with a regular sized party is probably going to play out in a much shorter time frame with a single player. Like I said, they're not making diplomatic decisions based on a group mentality. They're making it based on themselves. Now, a lot of you are sitting there going, oh, but that's fine. I'm going to be, as the GM, creating a whole bunch of NPCs who will fulfill the roles of the helmsman, the science officer, the engineer, the fighter pilot, or the cleric who's going to keep my player character who's the fighter alive. That has been done before, and I have tried it, and in my opinion, it doesn't work. All that it's doing is it's shifting your focus as the GM away from where it should be, which is storytelling, to some kind of weird, I'm part of this party and I'm helping the main character, but because I have GM knowledge, because I am the GM, my character can't really help make decisions around the point that this character is deliberating on because I know the ramifications. And yes, you might say, well, I'm going to distance myself. This character has got these goals and these are the goals that this character is going to go with. The problem is that the player of the character will be taking your cues as being slightly more informed. because they are going to be slightly more informed. So you run the risk of not so much tainting the player's decision-making process, but severely influencing it. If you have a character as the GM, so what does that leave you with? Well, it leaves you with the role of the NPCs. And this gives you the greatest opportunity to truly shine. What's the difference between a GM character and an NPC, you might ask? Well, the GM character, theoretically, should have their own goals, should have their own objectives, and should be a leading character. An NPC, run by the GM, is not. They are literally the supporting cast. So the difference being is if you look at, say, a TV series like Battlestar Galactica or Firefly or Star Trek or Babylon 5 for that matter, if you look at any of those situations, you have 5 or 6 or 7 main characters who, yes, we follow them throughout the course of the show and we discover things about them, and they each have their own episode, if you like, where we learn more about them. Take all of that out, and now you're shifting from a TV series, which I'm equating here to a standard party size, and you're now shifting to a feature film, where, yes, you might have multiple characters, but the one main character is the focus of the movie. All the rest kind of are there, but they're not the central focus. We might get glimpses into their world, but we don't certainly focus on it. And that's the difference in my mind between a single player and multiple players in your game. You shift from doing a TV series to doing a feature film. And you can be so much more dramatic and so much more epic in a one-player game. Here's the reason why. Story becomes paramount. There's not going to be the chaotic nature of a multi-party group that splits left, splits right, and doesn't go anywhere near your narrative. There is one person. To guide one person on your journey of the adventure is so much easier. There aren't dissenting voices. And because there's one character, the story really is around them. It circles around their character. They can be so much more involved, even on a small scale. But it's not being split apart, it's not being diluted by other people's choices. This is your story that you as the GM are telling, and you've got a central character around which it all hinges. And you can design it specifically for that character. This is the pinnacle of storytelling, in my opinion. You've got this amazing opportunity to really explore complicated ideas because you, again, don't have multiple voices mudding up the picture. It's one person. So those NPCs that we were talking about, yes, they're the helmsman, they're the cleric that might keep the fighter alive, but their background. If they're asked for their opinion, give a couple liners, but play them against each other. So again, the decision making doesn't fall onto an NPC. It's, what do you think? Well, I think the logical course of action would be to avoid engagement altogether, says the science officer. The engineer says, we should take them down, Jim. I don't think we should let them survive. And then, of course, the helmsman is, well, perhaps we should just talk to them. I don't know. So you're not actually giving any kind of solid advice to the player, but you are giving them lots of options. And you're letting them know that all of these options are open. And, of course, then the counselor comes along and says, well, the decision really is yours to make, Captain. You know we'll follow you wherever you go. So think about a one-on-one game as a feature film epic that you are crafting with one character and that you can really delve into all kinds of stories that you wouldn't normally go on with a major group. It really allows you to hyper-focus on very detailed storytelling that specifically centers around one character, and that's an amazing opportunity. Well, I hope this has helped briefly in how to run a one-on-one game. If you feel you want more, let me know in the comments below. But until next time, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and happy gaming.